afternoon, and welcome to today's episode of The Gospel According to Dr. Roger, where you get from me and my guests the absolute unvarnished truth, I promise, about everything going on today, all the major issues, all the spin. We unpick it for you and tell you what's really happening. There is no other program like it. And if you don't think that's the case, please contact us and tell us what we can do to make things better. But we have all worked very hard to bring you what is one of, if not the only program where you really get the lowdown, you really get the truth. Now, my guest today is a very special person. He is one of the, I personally would say, the number one conservative right-wing broadcaster in the United Kingdom today. That's Mike Graham from the Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk, formerly Talk TV. He is talk radio royalty. He has been there for years, and he is absolutely amazing, no holds barred. And we're going to bring Mike in now. Hello, Mike. Welcome
Roger,
to the show.
hi. How are you?
Well,
What a pleasure.
It's our pleasure to have you. You're a very, very big figure, and we're flattered and honored to have you with us. And I'd like to lead off by asking you to comment on the amazing tweet that you posted this morning about our wonderful Labor Party, and if you can explain it, the chicken nuggets, and how unbelievable it all is. It's such a story, my goodness.
It really is. I mean, I don't know where to begin, really, Roger, because this government feels like it's been around for years and years and years, but they really haven't. They haven't even been in a year. I think they've just about got to 7 months in, and it's just been one disaster after another. You know, I said when they got elected that they would be hopeless, because I believed that they would be hopeless. I thought they would change the face of Britain, which they're trying to do, and I thought they would be ruthlessly kind of efficient, like all good dictatorships of the socialist realm, you know. But actually, the only thing they're ruthless about is their complete and utter incompetence, because they don't seem to have a clue what they're doing. Almost everything that they've introduced has backfired. They've got problems inside the party, outside the party. They've lost 3 ministers of state already, plus the woman who was supposed to organise the whole thing at the beginning, which we can go into in fuller detail later on. But we've now got basically a failing political system, which is fighting almost against its own people to do the things that nobody wants them to do. We've got a failing judicial system, which is the remnants of Tony Blair's kind of, you know, rather weak and terribly, you know, what you might call neo-Marxist ideas that ruined Britain first time around up until about 2010. Then you've got the Tories who came in and did more or less the same thing and also ruined the country. I'm surprised that we are still actually standing as a nation at this point. You know, we've got the chicken nuggets thing is a story that we had today, which was a report about an Albanian criminal who's committed so many crimes, even though he's a UK citizen, that we decided we must deport this guy. You know, he was given UK citizenship. He came here as a 15-year-old, pretended to be a Kosovan refugee, pretended to be, you know, ethnically cleansed out of the former Yugoslavia. It turned out not to be the case. He was an Albanian, which many of Albanians have used as a route. Came here, met a woman, had some kids, but apparently cannot be deported to Albania despite his very long and dangerous criminal record, because apparently his son, according to his lawyer, who's 10 years old, doesn't like the chicken nuggets that they make in any other part of the world apart from in Britain. And you kind of go, I would be embarrassed to even present that as a lawyer, as a case, right? But not only was it successfully presented, it was bought hook, line and sinker by the judge. And so he's not going anywhere. He's going to stay here so the kid can eat chicken nuggets to his heart's content.
What kind of a judge was that? Is he a rooster or something?
Well, you do have to wonder, don't you? I think this is the problem. I think, you know, you and I have looked together at some of the reasons why these bodies. I mean, I've heard an interesting thing today from a caller actually to talk, who said that the problem with socialism now is that it's changed. It's no longer the kind of the working man and the horny sons of the soil, sort of toiling away in the fields and coming in at night, absolutely exhausted, to be given soup and bread by either their masters or their wives and families. They've become globalists effectively. So, the idea that they want to be part of things like the European Union, they want to be part of things like the World Health Organization, they want to be part of these kind of big sort of international groups of things like the World Economic Forum. And it makes them feel warm and fuzzy. They don't really care about the people anymore. They don't really care about anything. They care about institutions. They care about big government. They want to tell you what to do, what you can say, what you can't say, where you can go, all of that stuff. And so socialism has kind of morphed into this, under Keir Starmer, really rather counter-revolutionary, horrible, really, really badly run dictatorship.
Absolutely. And then you've got this Andrew Gwynn, who's been
Oh,
for these anti-Semitic and other totally uncalled for comments on social media. Do you think this is a sign of bigger problems in labor or just an unfortunate one-off?
no, I think it's absolutely a sign of what the people in this party that are governing us actually think. This guy, Andrew Gwynn, he's a former Corbynite, right? So he comes from the left side of the party. And we know, no matter what Keir Starmer might tell us, he hasn't changed that part of the Labour Party. Those people are anti-Semitic. They don't like Jewish people. They generally side with, Muslim communities and minority communities in inner city areas. They run councils which are dependent upon the Muslim vote. Therefore, they think that it's helpful to them to be anti-Semitic. Worse than even the anti-Semitism, though, was the complete and utter contempt that this guy Andrew Gwynn, who was the health minister, seemed to have for all the people. He was wishing pensioners dead. He was making fun of Diane Abbott. I mean, we all do that, but he was doing it in a kind of racist way. He
Yeah.
was making fun of Bernie Grant. You might not like Bernie Grant, but he was quite a well-known figure in London politics. He was a successful figure in London politics, but making fun of him because he was black, made a joke about his corpse. Apparently, I haven't found the joke yet. He apparently made some joke as well, sexist joke about Angela Rayner performing a sex act, which is quite horrifying to think about, although I'm sure it happens. But, at the end of the day, I think it gives you a window into what the people inside this Labour Party actually talk about when nobody's watching them.
When they think nobody's watching them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And so
how does this whole situation play out for Labor's image now? Are voters starting to lose trust, or is it
totally.
is it just another scandal? I mean, I've been broadcasting and reporting and making jokes and as you about this for years about the Tories. I mean, how can anybody believe the things that Fishy Rishi and Bates Motel Hunt keep telling us? I mean, don't they realize nobody believes them? But this is
Yeah,
10 times worse, for goodness.
yeah. Well, this is a new level, I think,
Yeah.
of uselessness, because I was aware and I was willing to accept that here we were going to have a few rough years. This government would come in, they'd probably put taxes up, even though they swore blind that they wouldn't, which of course they've gone back on. They'd probably not be very friendly towards people who made a success of their lives in this country, because Labour, apart from Tony Blair, who actually didn't mind people who were successful, they don't like successful people. They've tried to punish people who put their kids in private school.
Yeah.
The result, of course, of that is, as I predicted it would be, state schools are now full up and haven't got any room for the kids who are coming out of the private system. So nobody knows what to do because there's no room for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've done the same with the farmers and the inheritance tax. They've taken the pensioners' fuel allowance away from them. They've gone after all the groups of people that they think won't vote for them or won't ever vote for them. It's like a class war, but they're not very good at it because they've done it in such a bad way that Keir Starmer is now the most unpopular prime minister, I think, of all time.
All
It's,
time. It's
it's
surreal. It's surreal.
yeah,
So look, 1 in 5 individuals in a recent poll say that who voted conservative would now vote reform. That's got to
yeah.
raise a few eyebrows, right? So, I mean, what does that say about Labor's position now, do you think, Mike?
Well, Labour are quite frightened of reform as well. I mean, they put out this weekend a couple of adverts on social media using the blue colour of reform and reform's badge. They're
Yeah.
trying to make out as though reform had somehow endorsed Labour on migration, because suddenly they've decided they've got to get tough on migration because they think that's going to save them. Because the problem they've got with reform is in a lot of constituencies that they won, reform came second. and Reform are now predicted to get quite a lot of those seats off Labour. So it's not just the Tories that Reform is stealing votes from, it's also Labour.
Yeah,
And
sure. But
so,
I mean, they're trying, forgive me interrupting, but they're trying to position themselves, aren't they, as the safe alternative between the crazy chaos of the Tories and
mm,
the far right
yes,
actions of reform, backed up by the
mm,
madmen Trump and Musk and the rest. I mean,
right.
do you think this strategy will hold up? Can Starmer and company actually sell that?
I don't think so. I mean, most people that I speak to, and I admit that they're not everybody in the country, but they've lost faith in what they call the uni party, the Tories and Labour.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, there's not much to prove that they're any different. I mean, I had a Tory MP on the show this week. And I said to him, and he said, we've got to prove that we're going to go back to conservative values. And I said, yeah, but the reason you lost the election was because you weren't conservative anymore. And he said, well, and he started reeling off all these things about, a strong economy and a strong on migration. And I'm going, yeah, well, okay. Well, if that's the case, if you're going to be conservative, tell me you're going to ditch net zero. He wouldn't do it because
No.
they can't do it because they've signed up to all this ridiculous international nonsense that most sensible people know is an absolute crock of rubbish. Nobody cares about net zero. No one.
Nobody. So let's fast forward a year. Do you see Keir Starmer still there, or are we heading for
No.
maybe even a change of government?
Well, I said this to you a few months ago, and I'm still sure of it, and I don't even know why, but I'm now more sure. I'm not sure we're going to get Labour out before the next election, but I'm pretty hopeful and pretty sure that Keir Starmer will be dumped because he's hopeless. I mean, basically, come April, we are going to have the biggest business time bomb to hit every single company in this country that employs people. National
Yeah.
insurance is going to go through the roof. I've spoken to people, as I'm sure you have, who have got what I would call medium-sized businesses. Maybe they employ, 20, 30, 40 people, something like that. These businesses are going to be paying upwards of 300 to half a million extra pounds a year just in national insurance. Businesses are saying they're not hiring anybody anymore. The economy is going to go even further down the drain. Rachel Reeves hasn't got a clue. I mean, the idea that she was going to be some kind of iron chancellor, she's useless. She doesn't. I don't think she even owns an abacus. This woman, she doesn't seem to have a clue about how to fix fiscal policy. She doesn't seem to know anything about interest rates.
She
She knows
doesn't seem to
nothing
even
about.
know, she doesn't even know what fiscal policy means.
No, I don't think she does. And so I think that there's already noises being made, apparently, inside of the Labour Party, inside of government, that Starmer needs to go because he's ruining the chances of a lot of these first-time MPs from getting re-elected. They're all going to lose their seats.
A lot of my left-leaning friends are saying, well, Labor's current crisis is due to media coverage. I wish they'd leave them alone.
Yeah,
I,
sure, of course.
I don't buy that because, I mean, you can see what they're doing right in front of you.
Well, this is the trouble, you see. People who are from the left always think that everyone's after them, right? The BBC on Sunday morning with their flagship program, Laura Kunsberg, right? I was waiting for them to start talking about the Andrew Gwynn story, right? Which was a fresh story on the front page of the papers. Their first headline was not about that. Their second headline was not about that. Their third headline was not about that. They were talking about Gaza before they were talking about the biggest political story in Britain that day, which was this guy getting suspended because he was a minister in the Ministry of Health, and he
Hell,
basically wished pensioners dead and was making anti-Semitic remarks. They didn't think that was a story until they got to the paper review when they sort of touched upon it, but they really didn't want to cover it. You can tell that the BBC, whatever you may think of them as a right-wing organisation, they're very much not. The Labour people say, oh yeah, they're run by people who are Tories. They're the chairman's a Tory, the director general's a Tory. All of this, they are still dyed in the wool. It's lefties, no question.
well, I mean, it's crazy. I was on a BBC program the other night, and as I came out of Broadcasting House, there were several hundred people demonstrating against the BBC's prejudice in favor of Israel and reporting everything in favor of Israel and not the Palestinians. And I just scratched my head.
I mean, seriously, I mean, well, they should have watched Laura Kunsberg's interview with the president of Israel on Sunday morning, Herzog, and she kept asking him about a UN report into the way that Palestinian prisoners were being treated inside of Israeli jails, where he said, well, the United Nations is not an unbiased organisation. They've never been inside the jails, but she wouldn't leave it alone. And she kept refusing to call Hamas a terrorist group, kept reporting all of the terrible things that Israel was supposed to have done, and didn't give a jot of, or a stuff of the fact that, on the one side, you've got a group of bloodthirsty, ghastly terrorists who are starving people to death in tunnels underneath Gaza. And on the other hand, you've got a democratically elected government who are retaliating for one of the worst terrorist atrocities that we've ever seen.
Absolutely. Looking ahead to the next general election, what do you think, with all of this going on, then the key issues will be?
I think the economy will be massively big. Immigration, once again, because I don't see Labour doing anything about it. They're going to pass this new migrant bill, which apparently is going to give them the right to search people when they come into the country. So instead of giving them a new jacket and a piece of pizza and a hotel room, apparently they're going to try and figure out who they are. But the trouble is, these people are very smart. They're criminals. They're coming into the country illegally. They're not going to pay attention to a new law that's been brought in, and they don't give you their phone because they throw it in the sea. There's no point. What are you going to do? And so, as we know, even if they start cracking down on these gangs, they can't deport them. They arrested something like, I think, 6,000 people at the weekend or in the last week, going to nail bars, going to car washes, picking up these people who we all know are illegal, right? But they won't say when they're going to be deported because they can't deport them. And if the economy goes as badly as it is at the moment, which I think it will, there will be people out of business, there will be people out of work. They will want somebody to give them an answer as to what they're going to do. And I think Reform have got a very good chance of actually winning the biggest share of the vote and the biggest number of seats.
Right. So you think they could actually get in and will it be
Yeah.
Nigel? Will it be Nigel who's prime minister?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot of talk this week because somebody's putting it around, but Reform keep denying it. That they have to do some kind of deal with the Tories. Harry Cole wrote a piece in the Sun saying that if that's done, Farage will only accept it if he's the leader. He will only accept that deal if he's going to be prime minister. So, and I don't think they're going to do a deal with the Tories. I think they're going to finish the Tories off. The Tories are done. You know.
Yes, I think you'll remember that on your show, even I announced 14 days before the general election that I thought that the Tories should hand the keys to Nigel and
Yeah.
let him and Reform run things in a merger effectively or a takeover. Otherwise, they were going to be creamed, and they were creamed. And
Yeah.
I said this would never happen, but I wanted it on record that somebody had said that there was a chance to save things from what
Mm.
we've got now, and we didn't avail ourselves of it. But I also said that if that didn't happen, I thought it very unlikely that Nigel would come together with the Tories and
Mm.
find some way to work together because they just haven't changed that much. It's
No.
same
And also,
faces.
it would make no sense for their members because people have gone away from the Tories to Reform because they don't like the Tories. They don't like what they did. They don't like the fact that they betrayed everybody over immigration. Don't forget, even Boris Johnson, for all of his good points, promised to bring net migration down to 20,000. And that was
Yeah,
in 2019, you
yeah,
know. And
yeah,
it's closer to 2 million than it is to 20,000. Um,
absolutely.
and it's just a betrayal. And people have seen the Britain that they know and love and that they grew up in changing irrevocably.
Terrible.
You walk down the street, it doesn't look the same. You see, the personification of evil. I mean, I was on a bus today because I sometimes travel by bus because it's the quickest way to get around because they got bus lanes because you can't go in a car anymore because it's congestion everywhere. And I was talking to this old lady who said, oh, have you heard about the new thing? The local area where I live has got a park in it, and apparently they're now the mobile phone mugging brigade are out in force in this park. So everybody's warning everybody: if you go to this park, don't get your phone out because they're literally roaming around like packs of wolves on bikes, stealing from people anything you happen to have. If they see you've got a nice watch, they'll take that. If they see you're on the phone, they'll take that. We're living in a lawless Britain right now, and this bleeding government is doing nothing about fixing it.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Sadiq Khan. I mean, a man who once wanted to be prime minister himself. I think that day has gone, thankfully. But he's an ambitious little fella, and he's not going to want to give up London. Who knows where he's going to end up?
Um, the guest I had on the previous show was not a fan of Nigel or reform.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I mean, I said to him, if Nigel cured cancer, you'd call that a publicity stunt. Um,
And is he one of those from the right who thinks that they're all a bit of a con?
yes, and
Right.
and that they are very disorganized and don't actually have any structure or policy, and that if given all the factors we've discussed today, Mike, reform is propelled into the general election as winner and Nigel becomes the leader, they'll turn around, to paraphrase what this gentleman said, and look at things and say, oh my God, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, do you know, I think that's kind of exactly what's happened to Labour. I kind of see that that's what's happened to Starmer. They got into power, and I'll come on to reform in a second. With this great plan. I mean, we've got clip after clip after clip. We play them every day of Keir Starmer saying we're prepared for government if we're fortunate enough to be, handed the keys to Downing Street. We've prepared every department. Everything has been costed. Suddenly they get into power and they go, oh, we're not quite sure what we're doing. We can't do any of it. We haven't got any money. There's no money. They knew exactly how much money they had, and what they have is a paucity of talent. They've got a very bad sort of team inside of Labour. And I think that's where reform have to be careful. They have to make sure that as they grow, as they become more ambitious, they have to look for the right people. They don't want to have loads of people who are going to turn out to be nutters or crazies, people that have done weird stuff in the past, people that have dressed up as Nazis, people that have stood for the National Front. They've got to be really good about selecting some very smart people. They've got some very smart people at the moment in Parliament. I think the 5 MPs are doing a great job.
Yeah,
But can they find enough people is a question that would worry me. But they've got time. I mean, they managed to turn all of this around. Don't forget, until I think practically the election was called, Nigel Farage wasn't even going to run
absolutely.
because
No,
he didn't think there was enough time for him to prepare.
they did it in a real quick time, that's sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think if that's what they can do inside of a month and a half, 2 months, then I think if they're building it right, they've got a really good chance of becoming. I mean, they can't be worse than Labour or the Tories, surely.
Nothing can.
I don't think they can. I really don't. I mean, when
Nothing.
you look at the history of Starmer having got in July the 4th, Independence Day, rather ironically, from your side of the pond. He's first of all, he had the woman who was planning the first 100 days, Sue Gray, supposed to be the cleverest and most integrity-filled woman that had ever walked the streets of London. She didn't even last 100 days. She was planning the first 100 days. She got to day 93
Yeah.
before she left. It turns out Keir Starmer, you might remember, was paid even less than she was. And when she was asked to take less money than him, she said, no, 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 I definitely want more money. He couldn't stop it. But what he tried to stop was anybody reporting it. He tried to get insiders at Downing Street to lean on the BBC not to report the story. He then lost Louise Haigh, who was the transport Secretary of State for Transport. Turned out she's a convicted fraudster, right? And nobody knew. She had pretended to have a phone stolen about 10 times. Unbelievable. She's gone. Next, it's Tulip Sadiq, his good friend from North London, who bizarrely is appointed to be the anti-corruption czar in London, and is now being charged with corruption by the Bangladeshi authorities, who might extradite her because of all the private houses she seems to have, both in Bangladesh and in London, bought by ill-gotten gains. And now we've got this guy Andrew Quinn, and I think the other guy's just been suspended as
Yeah.
well. Oliver, what's his face?
Oliver, yeah.
Oliver Roy, is it? It's a shambles. It's a complete shambles.
It almost looks like the Tories, it's
Well, yeah,
yeah.
it does. But somehow it's worse because they were so virtuous. They were so sure that it was going to be. We've got another clip where he talks about it'll be a government of service. That was before we found out about Lord Alley.
So sanctimonious.
Yeah, this is before we found out Lord Alley was buying his suits, bankrolling his wife's clothes, buying him glasses, giving Angela Rayner a house to stay in New York. The corruption of this particular government is off the scale. I'm sorry, it's even worse than the Tories.
So last question, are they losing touch with their core base? Have they lost touch or not at all?
Definitely. I think so. I think a lot of people voted Labour in because they were sick of the Tories and they thought, well, let's give them a chance. How bad can they be? And a lot of them are now regretting it. When you consider the real heart of Labour was what they won in 2019. They only won one constituency in 2019, and it was Putney. in southwest London. Now,
Yeah.
Putney, as you well know, is hardly a bastion of Bolsheviks and, left-wing working class people, working the post office. It's full of multi-million-pound homes, Volvos, and Range Rovers, and
Yeah.
those are the people that vote Labour now. It's all the
Yeah.
people with money that can afford it that vote Labour.
It's certainly a big change. Mike, thank you very much. That was absolutely energizing and fascinating. And we will
Well,
be
very good.
having. Go on.
Very good to see you, Roger. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
We'll be having you on again. Thank you so much.
Definitely, no problem.